Island and Vermont. There are not big states left. Historical accidents, an issue relating to the pork that we have not got back in Colorado, given the short duration of our senators typically in our history. We never got judges in courthouses. It distorts justice in a huge way. Imagine doing a fifth of your criminal cases down in southwest Colorado when you've got issues like Joe Nacho to deal with in Denver. How do you get people back and forth? And then add to it the incredible embarrassment that since 1789, no one has figured out in the Justice Department or in Congress that we should have a bigger travel budget than Rhode Island. I had the same travel budget per capita as U.S. Attorney, as all my predecessors did, the same formula, and the same as my counterpart in Rhode Island. That's the kind of distortion of this federal system that holds us down in Colorado. So Sam Brown was the first of the line. Ralph Carr is very much in vogue. I hope you all read Adam Schrager's wonderful book. If he's not talked to this club, he should. He's a magnificent man. Channel 9, he wrote this book on Ralph Carr. They're going to name the new state Supreme Court building after Ralph Carr. Stood up for the Japanese Americans being interned in World War II. Said they were welcome in Colorado, got thrown out of office. Great patriot. He was the U.S. Attorney under Herbert Hoover, so there is hope, folks. There is hope. And Lewis Rockwell, you all know, is the only U.S. Attorney who was ever kicked to death by his horse. And he was. It's kind of sad. Out on Broadway, a swift blow to the aorta, and he was no more. So we've had some very interesting characters as U.S. Attorneys. Next slide. All right, hard to read, but this is my message to you. I'm going to go through these slides very quickly. Our crime has become globalized in Colorado to the point that 1/2 of all the federal cases that arise in this state have international connections. That is a tremendous change. And guess what? Our travel budgets, our budgets for staffing cases, it's the same formulas we had 50, 75 years ago, in essence, for how we deal with this. So we deal with cases like terrorism, we deal with drug trafficking, and these matters are increasingly taking us into other countries. Next slide. What am I talking about? How many of you heard about the Supermax? You know what Supermax is? What is it? Somebody tell me. What is the Supermax? High security prison. Is this like any prison? No. This is the prison where we got roughly 314,000 inmates in the federal system right now. And the worst 492 are in this one prison. They may not be the absolute worst, but they're certainly some of the most notorious. People like the shoe bomber, Richard Reed. Of course, the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. Musawi, the hijacker who didn't get his plane in 9/11. It's a rogues gallery down there. We have right now in the U.S. Attorney's Office 2 people who do nothing but defend the right to keep these guys locked up. 2 people, full-time equivalent, 2 people, you're paying roughly $140,000 a year plus all the staffing. Their mission for the nation, for the whole United States, is to keep these guys locked up. There is a concerted effort by a number of different groups, including the University of Denver College of Law clinic, civil rights clinic, that has a special clinic devoted to this purpose, to make sure these guys have maximum privileges and ideally can be released if warranted. And so we have a special set of requirements that the Attorney General has imposed on 42 of these inmates, including these 3. And all it says is that we're going to read their mail, we're going to listen to their phone calls, we're going to make sure their lawyers don't smuggle messages out to other people. Why do we need such an intrusive regime for 42 out of 314,000 inmates in the federal system? Because another fellow who's not up here, as has been publicly reported, named Mahmoud Abalima, one of the bombers of the '93 attack on the World Trade Center, it has been publicly reported, was in communication out of the federal prison system to the Al-Qaeda cells in the Middle East, who planned the 3/11 attacks in Madrid, Spain. And when they went through the wreckage, they found among the bodies of some of the suicide bombers instructions for carrying out an attack written by Mahmoud Abalima while he was in federal custody. We weren't reading properly and translating from Arabic into English what he was telling these folks to do. When they started to look around Al-Qaeda and our troops began to go into places and remove materials people had to recruit suicide bombers in places ranging from Iraq to Afghanistan to the West Bank, they found communications that have been copied from coming out of the federal prison system. The source for that public source is a 2006 audit by the Bureau of Prisons Inspector General. After that, the Attorney General said, you know, we really need someone to make sure that this mail is monitored. They still get their mail, but it ought to be read. The phone calls have to be monitored, and it can't be contemporaneous. That is, you read it, you analyze it, and then there's a reasonable time, not more than typically 3 days before they get to see their mail. And in the case of phone calls, someone listens to it simultaneously and is able then to record it, and then they do the recorded message, and if it's okay, then they have several people listening, so they can't do it completely delayed. But that's what they've done. We've had to defend that. There are 2 people in Denver who do nothing but defend those kinds of measures, those particular measures for 42 people. Next slide. And all they do basically is make sure that these folks stay locked up. Another one that we've had many issues with is Robert Hansen, the fellow who spied for the Soviet Union, former FBI agent. Next slide. We've had death penalty cases down there, the first death penalty cases that had ever been brought and handled in the Supermax prison. If it's hard to kill someone in prison, it's really hard to do it in the Supermax where you're in shackles 23 hours a day. But believe it or not, it can be done. And so the office has had to deal with that issue as well, and safety issues. We had one while I was U.S. Attorney where Joel Heffley, how many people remember Joel, congressman from Colorado Springs? He was going to visit the Supermax. And by the way, I encourage all of you to visit our prisons, state and federal, get a feel for that. Make sure your kids do it too. You don't have to tell them anything, they just have to go and see it so they understand what the world is like. But Joel Heffley wanted to do a tour to Supermax. He went down there. There was an inmate, a white supremacist skinhead guy who was waiting. He had been hoarding cleaning solution. He had a way he thought he could blind Joel Heffley. He was all set. And incredibly enough, at that time, he still had a microwave oven privilege. So during his time he had in the common areas, he could heat up his cleaning fluid. He had it all worked out so that when Congressman Heffley came by, he could blind him. Well, Heffley changed his schedule that day, and the guy was mad. So he just decided to blind the first officer he could find, and he did his plot. Fortunately, the burns, which were very extensive on the fellow's face, were such that they did not end up with permanent vision loss, although he had some vision damage. Example of cases that you get down there. Spend a tremendous amount of time dealing with the nation's issues from people who are there. The head of the order, the head of the various white supremacist groups, many of them incarcerated just west of Pueblo. Next slide. Gang takedowns. I don't have to tell you that we had recently the biggest gang takedown ever between the center of the country, Chicago, St. Louis, to the West Coast. That happened in 2007. What you may not know is that it resulted in more than 100 indictments federally, many indictments out of the grand jury in Denver and Mitch Morrissey's office. So when you see matters like the tragic murder of Darren Williams, and then you hear that, hey, somebody's been apprehended, what you need to remember is this. The next time someone says the war on drugs is a waste, what a terrible thing, how can we possibly spend money this way? Just please remember one of the benefits of the war on drugs. The benefit are tremendously long prison sentences that federal prosecutors can use to use drug crime offenses, drug trafficking offenses, to put pressure on bad guys to solve local homicides and local crimes. As has been publicly reported in Denver, we solved 13 state homicides using essentially the hammer of federal drug crimes on people who would not cooperate with us during the past 2 years alone. Basically, you come up to someone and say, it's the federal prison system. You don't get parole. You'll serve at least 85% of your sentence. It's time to talk. What happened to Darren Williams? It's amazing how people start to cooperate when there's actually time and pressure applied through the federal narcotics laws. It's a balanced debate. It's not a perfect debate, but there is another side to the debate. What we did in the takedown of the Trey Crips and the Rolling 30s Crips, we took one of the most violent gangs in the country off the streets permanently. Elements of it are still in place, but by and large, the gang has been decapitated, and it was incredible to see violent crime drop to record low levels as a result, we think, of the activities leading up to 650 officers who did a wake-up call on these guys one morning, and then all the indictments, all the pressure applied to them to eliminate those drugs. Next slide. Go through these next slides, get a sense of some of the seizures and some of what we got. I would say as an aside, we had